I know it was a long day of the chamber, but we'll try to move quickly and act on a couple of bills and hear another one as well. To get started, Representative Yertle, will you say a word of prayer for us?
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for the beauty of this day. We thank you for the opportunity to come here and serve, help guide and direct us on every issue that we face today. And remember that you are the truth and the light, and help us to guide us in that direction. In his name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with, we'll start out with House Bill 589. Chairman Chokus, if you'll come to the podium. And we are working from a substitute, correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
LC 5007955S.
That's correct.
This will be LC 5007955S will be the substitute members that we're working from.
Yes,
Chairman Chokus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before you House Bill 589, and what and I want to thank Greg Griffin, who is the director of the Department of Audits, for helping me with this. He did a great job. But from time to time, we require fiscal notes and economic analyses, and the Department of Audits is unable to doesn't have the manpower to get them handled. And sometimes they give them to government entities, or mostly our universities. For example, at Georgia State, it's the Fiscal Research Center, Department of Agriculture at UGA, Carl Vinson Institute, and at Georgia Southern, the Center for Business. But sometimes they give them to independent contractors, and this is what this bill attempts to address. We want to make sure that the independent contractors that provide these fiscal notes and economic analyses are not influenced by any funding or outside sources, and so this requires the state auditor to compile a list for disclosure of any outside entities that make contributions or fund these independent auditors, and that's basically what this bill does. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Chairman Chokus. Any questions from members of the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And I know that you work with the state accounting office or state auditor's office, and any comments? They're good.
They were good. They're not here. I told them.
He gave me a thumbs up in the back, so. Thank you for that. All right, so with that, with House Bill 589, what is the will of committee? We have a motion to pass. We have a second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Chokus, you have it. Thank you, sir. All right, next we have House Bill 1293. Chairman Yertle. Does members have a copy of it in their folder?
And publish a public website that would have an interactive taxpayer receipt and also a web-based application for a budget simulator. And the purpose of this is just to give our citizens a chance to really look to see how their hard-earned taxpayers' dollars are spent. It would be a good civic education tool. It would also clear up many questions. You know, when our citizens look at a budget, they're often complicated and very, very detailed and very long. This taxpayer receipt, for instance, would give folks the opportunity they would put in their basic information like their age and their income, and it would break down for them all the different agencies and levels of spending or categories of spending that the state does. It would break it down from the governor's office to the legislature to education, whatever, and we could go as detailed as we want to on that, but I think that would be a great tool for the citizens to work with. Also, it includes a budget simulator where you could interactively work with that simulator to adjust items in the budget to see how they would affect other items in the budget. And, you know, for instance, if you wanted to plug in more spending in education, you could look at that and see how that affects the rest of the budget and kind of work with balancing the budget yourself. So a couple of years ago, I did a bill on financial literacy, and I could see those classes that are going to start being taught this fall using this simulator to look at how the state does its budget and see how they can tweak things, and actually this certainly would help our citizens give us feedback. And you know, it's all in the idea of transparency and just, again, seeing how, you know, our dollars are spent in the state of Georgia.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any questions, Mr. Horner?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you,
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
for bringing this bill.
Yes,
It's a
sir.
wonderful bill. Could this project over a few years as well, or is it just a single year?
No, it would go as long as we wanted to do it. Basically, you would have a startup, and then you would go for, you know, as many years as you choose to do it. And I think it would be a popular thing with our citizens. So I don't really see it going away. I think people would enjoy looking at it. And again, you know, when you speak to groups, the public doesn't understand where, you know, our dollars go. They assume maybe most of our money goes toward transportation, but in reality, most of our tax dollars go to education, health care. That's 70-something% right there. So the public really doesn't realize that until we tell them, and this would be a great tool for them to be more informed.
Thank you.
All right, for members of the committee, I do want to point out that Section 2 of the bill, lines 44 and 45, is subject to appropriation for this to continue. And there would be, I understand, like a $400,000 first year and then some remaining thereafter, but just for the gratification of the committee, that it is subject to appropriations. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. I think I asked a similar question when we reviewed this, I think it was just last week, but I'm curious to know if you had any further consideration or conversation related to the buckets that would be displayed. The wording here now says major categories. And so, again, just would you be open to being more specific about, you know, inclusivity of all categories so that in the spirit of transparency, those numbers are shown, the big buckets that align with the budget, not every line item, but.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think the more we do, the better. You know, in my opinion, I think that's a great tool to see where it's all spent. You know, I don't have a problem with disclosing anything that we spend in the state of Georgia. So as far as we can, you know, practically go, basically, I would like to see us do.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lumpton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really super. I was, you know, freaking out about it because I love things that bring our government down to earth for our folks.
Sure.
Two questions, though. One is, this is published to a public website. Will this live on our, like, General Assembly website, or is there an idea of what website this is going to be living on?
You know, we talked a little bit about that Friday, and I think there could, you know, be an application, an app for it,
Okay.
or we could do some kind of attachment to our General Assembly website. And, you know, the House Budget and Research Office does things. They do a great job of publishing some information on Georgia and have little booklets that we see, but
Yeah.
this would be a great interactive tool that people would actually see their own you know, how their own tax dollars are affected.
Right,
So,
how it lands with them.
so
One more question. Is there any provision, I didn't see anything in here dealing with privacy or what's going to happen to the information that gets typed in here?
privacy as far as is the person interacting with it, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, if you're going to, you know, you're going to put in your personal information about income and tobacco use and alcohol use and things like that, and the kind of car you have or whatever, is that going to be saved in perpetuity? Is that wiped out? You know,
Yeah.
Those sort of things.
This is not an information gathering. I think all that, we're not saving that type data. That's not the intent of it at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tarvin.
Just to make sure that I didn't get confused, and I'm easily confused.
Yes, sir.
This is an in-depth look and can be as deep as it wants to into our budget items.
That's correct.
It
Yes,
has
sir.
nothing to do with the people that are looking it up or personal information, or it's just state information.
That's correct.
And it
Yeah.
already is public knowledge, is that not correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
That's correct. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Ms. Campbell?
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. Just to put maybe even a finer point on this question, and maybe I'm not understanding this correctly, but on line 24,
Mm-hmm.
it says, on line 19, estimate how the taxes an individual pays are allocated to each major expenditure category.
Yeah.
So in that way, it would be specific to the amount of tax an individual is paid, and
Right.
it shows the percentages. And you showed kind of, I think in the last meeting, we had a sample diagram of what that might look like.
That's correct. You would basically plug in, there's no name associated with it. You would just plug in your income and your age, and that breaks it down. So there's no privacy really issue that I can see with that at all. It would just be as simple as putting your income and your age in, and that kind of breaks it down to the different categories.
Okay, so in that way, estimate is the right term. It's not specific to how much tax you actually paid.
That's correct.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? All right, Chairman Yorda.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Any comments? We had a sign-up sheet. Any comments from the audience? Anybody want to make any comments? Okay. All right, with that, do we have a motion? We have a motion to pass on House Bill 1293, LC 560146S. I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, members, you will also find in your folder House Bill 1410 that was just recently referred to the committee, and we're going to ask Leader Frustration if you'll come forward, sir, and walk us through the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
LC 491862 for members of the committee. So, thank you, Mr. Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank you, Chair, and the committee members for hearing this bill just recently introduced. House Bill 1410 comes after I have been considering this issue for probably the past 5 years. Obviously, there continues to be an issue of unsheltered homelessness that we see here in Georgia's capital city, and it's something that I've thought a lot about. I previously worked over a summer actually hearing testimony about the current issue that we have and what funding is currently in place. And what I learned is that through federal funding through Housing First, there is actually a prohibition on having certain checks in place, such as ensuring that those who are receiving homeless benefits are held to sobriety standards, that there are other conditions put in place as organizations may be receiving federal assistance for homelessness. Now, that is particularly important for us to know because we as legislators that appropriate money to address homelessness are often tied to many of those federal regulations with the dollars that we're putting up. And so really what I'm bringing here today is a Georgia proposal, a solution to this problem where we would not be tied by these federal regulations, which in my mind are inconsistent with really doing something to address the problem. And I come at this considering the accountability court structure that we have in criminal law. So right now, let me begin by saying this proposal here would be completely voluntary. If somebody's homeless, they could participate in this program administered by a local organization. But what this would do is it would have a structure similar to what we have in, say, drug court, where there's a requirement to maintain sobriety, job training, to ensure that your kids are being cared for, to ensure that you're meeting all your responsibilities so that you're able to be successful. And at the end of the program, approximately 18 months, you could be self-sufficient, self-supporting, and able to go on and live your life and be a productive member of society. I think that in a lot of ways, this is a unique approach. There's also another unique aspect to this, which is while the state could permit grants through DCA to local organizations, authorities that may offer this structure, this would also allow for private contribution. So if major companies or folks involved in the community want to be supportive of addressing homelessness, that there'd be the ability to take those private funds and ensure that they could be put to work to actually address the problem. So if I could, Mr. Chairman, just briefly would like to run through the highlights of the bill. So there is an existing trust fund that is administered within DCA, but that fund includes state appropriations that are tied to these federal funds. So what I'm proposing here would be totally separated off from that within DCA. It would be a separate aspect of that fund. And the operative language really begins on line 166 and continues from there. So there would be a commission that would establish the process for this to be rolled out on or before January 1st, 2025, that would allow local organizations, agencies, and such to offer stable housing accountability programs. That there are very strict, specific requirements if someone's going to offer this. First of all, there has to be voluntary, immediate, and stable housing offered, that there is an 18-month or when the individual is able to obtain affordable housing, whichever occurs earlier. So there's a set into it. It doesn't just go on indefinitely. There is a requirement that the participants meet specific, very specific, rigorous requirements, which we'll get to beginning in 192. But it starts here with there has to be a requirement that the participants maintain sobriety from drugs and alcohol. Now, understanding the drug court system, there are relapses with specific sanctions, but this is not going to be a permissible program for you to be using drugs or using alcohol while in this program. There must be a commitment to sobriety in order to address the underlying issues which are potentially leading to the homelessness, very likely leading to the homelessness. Now, I would like to just run through these specific requirements, 193 to 205. So the objective here is to get employment for these individuals. So there's a requirement to provide proof of citizenship, U.S. citizenship, and to execute an affidavit that the resident has been, or the participant's been a resident of Georgia for the past 12 months. We don't want other states bringing homeless populations to Georgia to utilize this. And so we'd like to put some safeguards in place to ensure these are Georgians who are able to work from a residency standpoint, and we're able to then move on to the next. They would have to participate in free and relevant job training and educational opportunities in order to obtain the stable employment. They have to search and apply for stable employment. And then if that stable employment is given to them, they have to maintain it, okay? They would also need to participate in counseling, mental health care, and substance abuse treatment programs. They would need to submit to regular drug and alcohol testing. They would have to abstain from criminal activity. No criminal conduct is part of this program. If you're going to be part of this program and get the benefit of it, you need to follow that. And these programs have to maintain regular compliance. When I was a drug court prosecutor, the drug court judge would have court every Friday. And participants would need to show up. They need to talk about all these different things that they'd done, and there was checking to make sure that they were doing all these things. And if you didn't have a job, you would have to come to court every day and sit through court. So obviously that caused people to want to get jobs, but it was to make sure that they were doing something during the day, staying active. And obviously the Accountability Court has been a tremendous success in our state. I certainly feel that it has been, having been a prosecutor and seeing the success stories, not only for the participants who were able to get their lives on track, but also saving the state a tremendous amount of money in the long run. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to get into more specific aspects, but we've got safeguards on the other side of this bill as well that ensure that there is tracking being done to make sure that the resources expended are actually supporting the type of outcomes that I'm proposing here, as well as a data collection on the back end. I want to thank the participants who have been very supportive of this, or the advocates who have been very supportive of this. I believe that this will ultimately, you'll see that this can become a great partnership between the corporate world and government to ensure that we are working together to address homelessness in our state. And I will finally mention this, Mr. Chairman. I will probably propose at the appropriate time. I think there was just a drafting error putting something the incorrect place, but lines 184 to 185, it says, ensure that the minor children of any resident receives adequate nutrition, health care, and education. That's the participant's responsibility, not the program's responsibility. So that will need to be moved, I think, to between lines 202 and 203. But that's the bill as I summarize it. This is a conservative, responsible approach to giving individuals who may be homeless a path to get back on the right track, to ensure that they're self-sufficient, that they are gainfully employed, that they're not addicted to drugs and alcohol, that they're taking care of their kids, and that they can then provide stable housing for themselves so that they can go on and live their life without public assistance. And I'd ask for the committee's favorable consideration at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Leader. Questions from the committee? Floor Leader Gamble.
Thank you, Chairman. Leader Efstration, I appreciate your legislation, and you may have said at the beginning, but tell me the source of funds for these are federal funds that the state will pull down, or is this state funding that we're going to be providing?
No, sir. So the state is already funding into the existing trust fund with federal funds attached. This would be separate state money, unconnected to that, so that it would not be subject to those federal regulations.
Okay.
And then I expect there would be private contributions as well into
Okay.
this fund,
All right.
which is contemplated in the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Horner.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clear specification, what would it be additional state funding, or would it be state funding that is designated from a specific source?
It's whatever the legislature appropriates.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, subject to appropriation.
Yes, sir.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Chairman. So just, I have a number of questions, but the first one being, so this is seeking to establish a brand new trust fund. Is that accurate?
No, ma'am. It's a separate classification within the existing trust fund.
A separate classification within an existing trust fund that originally required a constitutional amendment to be created.
This is not, you're correct, this is not creating a new trust fund. It's telling DCA how certain money is to be spent within the existing trust fund.
So if you would entertain a couple more questions. I guess I'm just trying to kind of think back, I guess, in terms of our legal process for a constitutional amendment requiring trust fund setup. And so we cannot take back steps retroactively to put something on as a constitutional amendment that specifies a new subclassification of a trust fund. Can we?
Oh, so this is legal. So I've worked with legislative counsel to prepare it. I have no question that it's a legal framework to provide. The bottom line is we're instructing DCA how the money's to be used, or would be in the budget. But this is the framework within which a local organization could offer these programs, which would be funded in the budgeting process.
So if I could continue, just so following that line of thinking, then any trust fund within the state, we could then go back and subcategorize without an additional constitutional amendment and specify how funds should be used?
So first of all, I learned long ago not to try to engage in hypotheticals when I'm here as a witness in committee. I know this bill, and this bill is such that we are putting very specific rules in place for organizations that may want to receive funding, and this framework would be in place. And this would not be part of funding which is otherwise tied to receiving federal money with attached regulations.
And so within this subclassification of the trust fund itself, would the money be managed differently or within the same fund by the Treasury?
So the money would be administered by the Department of Community Affairs, and there would be rules as to how it is to be administered, which is what House Bill 1410 is.
And that seems clear to me. Just to continue on, the actual administration, the investment of the fund itself would still be managed in total by the Treasury?
Department of Community Affairs.
Okay, and another question then. You had mentioned not wanting to be tied to federal regulations, and I would be curious to understand specifically which regulations you are seeking to be disassociated with.
Yeah, sure. As I said earlier, Housing First. Housing First specifically prohibits the state from regulating that funds received for this purpose require that the participants abstain from drugs and alcohol. Sobriety is a critical component of future success. I believe that that's the incorrect policy, but that is what's required under Housing First. And so as long as federal funds are attached, local organizations that facilitate the homeless say we cannot ask about sobriety. We cannot inquire about drug testing or things like that as long as federal money is attached. This works to fix that problem. It's a Georgia approach to address some of the underlying causes that lead to homelessness and to ensure that our dollars are spent effectively in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. With part of that conversation, I'm going to ask Ledge Counsel to further expand a little bit on clarifying your question there. If Ledge Counsel.
I think it's already on. So, as it concerns this particular provision of the Constitution, it's an older provision, and it's in a different place than you might think of where we put these other trust funds. So this kind of exists as a creature of statute. The provision is very broad. It says that it creates this housing trust fund and may be expended for programs of purely public charity for the homeless. That's all the guidance this provision in the Constitution gives us. It's therefore largely a creature of statutory construction. And I can give you those statutes, but I did get a chance to briefly speak with the attorney, and they believe that this construction is appropriate and constitutional.
Thank you, sir. Vice Chairman Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's the first time anybody ever said that to me. Thank you, Mr. Leader, for bringing this. You know, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and so I appreciate y'all coming up with this. You took the words right out of my mouth. I've been studying that homeless trust fund legislation, original legislation, all year long, and it matches. It's going to work out fine, and I'm not even a lawyer and can tell you that. The only question I had was, do you intend to have like a companion funding bill potentially, like a tax credit to encourage corporations to invest in the homeless trust fund, similar to what we have with the rural hospitals or whatnot? Or would they just be, if they donated to the trust fund, they would only be looking at reducing their taxable income by that certain, whatever their income tax rate is, as opposed to like a dollar for dollar tax credit? Just a question.
Yeah, I'm not planning to bring a tax credit component to this, so there's no companion bill coming.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this up.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tarvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader, this is something also that's very dear to people in our state, and I've seen how the drug courts work, and I appreciate you bringing this bill. It's very complex. I mean, you know, you can't, and I know we don't pass bills to fix them later, but I would love to see this bill go through, and I have confidence that we could work out any problems we might have between now and sine die. And at the proper time, I'd like to make a motion, and I think it gives people a hand up that are really there to help themselves, and I think we could see some great results from it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Tarvin, just a moment. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Ms. Campbell.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time or not, but if we are considering voting on this today, I might like to make a motion to table it for, given we haven't even had an hour to review the legislation, for a little bit further contemplation.
Our challenge is at this point, we're looking for a room for tomorrow. I don't know that we're able to get one yet, understanding we've only had this for a very short period of time. I won't recognize for that motion for at the moment. Any other questions, comments, Leader Illustration? You have any closing comments?
No, sir. I want to thank the committee for the consideration here today. Obviously, this is something I'm going to continue to work on through the legislative process, to Chairman Tarvin's point. Happy to meet with anyone offline also if they think of anything else after today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tarvin. I had a motion and a second. Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Noted. Motion carries. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm sorry? Sure. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? 2. Thank you, ma'am. Motion carries. Thank you, members of the committee, for joining us this afternoon. We are adjourned.